On the Whole, As You Like It is one of the sweetest comedies of Shakespeare. No one suffers in the end, if nobody leads an intense life either. When he wrote this play, Shakespeare was living an idyllic life. He had already written his great histories and he was taking a plunge into writing his tragedies. His imagination abandons the court life, the battlefields, and he explores woods in this particular play. The woods of Arden are filled with shepherds, shepherdesses, lions, serpents, etc. All in all, the feeling of open air pervades the entire play. Even the dialogues are fresh and we can see a lot of freedom when the characters are rendering their dialogues. The play actually has no hero, but it has a heroine, Rosalind, who is quick-witted and intelligent. Unlike other Shakespearean heroines, she comes across as a person with a very strong personality and character. Love and service come very natural to her, and she feels that simple human virtues are elements of a good character. The play deals with the theme of usurpation and injustice also. It ends happily. The wrongdoers are not punished, but then they are reformed by Shakespeare. Therefore, we do not see a lot of malice in the play. It is a good play and it is an entertaining play for anybody to watch or to read. The first module of this part talks about the significance of the forest of Arden. As I have been teaching you this lesson, I have spoken in detail at length about Arden. It has a magical appeal to it. People who come to the forest of Arden, they do transform. That is something which I have been reiterating as and when I have spoken about Arden. The forest of Arden is an idyllic setting. It has a spiritual setting. It molds the characters. It has no place for selfishness, evil or malice. When the Duke Senior enters the forest of Arden, he is very happy. He says, "Sweet are the uses of adversity," and he finds goodness in the forest. He goes into the raptures of woodland life. Of course, not everybody is as happy as he is. Even though Arden is refreshing and beautiful, each character, once comes into the forest of Arden, his first impression is totally different. Rosalind is not really very impressed with the forest. Touchstone calls himself a fool for having come to the forest of Arden. Orlando calls it an uncouth forest because he cannot find food for Adam at all in this forest. So everybody has got their own opinion. Adam, when he comes to the forest, is actually on the verge of his old age, and that is the reason why we don't see Adam again after this particular act, because he stays back in the forest. Entry into the forest marks the consummation of his life. Orlando is at once put into lightheartedness, which was earlier missing in him in Act 1. The moment he comes to the forest, he uses the trees to write, verses for Rosalind. He declares his love for Rosalind in the verses that he carves out in the branches of the trees. He keeps himself busy by inscribing these verses. The characters do not struggle to become good. In the forest of Arden, they automatically become good, effortlessly become good. It is instantaneous. Oliver, when he enters the forest of Arden, he comes in search of Orlando with a hatred in his heart. But then, when Orlando saves him from the lioness, there is a transformation. He starts loving his younger brother. And the moment he meets Celia, he falls in love with her. So, this is the effect that the forest of Arden really has on the characters. The same way we notice that Duke Frederick, who is in touch with a religious man, also gives up the dukedom and comes to stay in the forest. And he realizes that he has committed a mistake. So, all in all, the forest of Arden is actually reforming people, making them better human beings. Yet Arden is not insubstantial or unreal. The inclemency of nature is there for anybody to see. It is present there. It is cold in the forest. It has sharp winds that keep blowing. And when that happens, the herd abandons the deer. The native shepherds and shepherdesses are also not as innocent as people of rustic life are. Phoebe is a heartless coquette, and Audrey is capable of leaving her earlier lover for Touchstone. So we do come across characters who are not really pure-hearted in the forest. But then overall, people who come from the city or come from the court and they move into the forest, we see that the forest of Arden has magical powers. Rosalind also, when she comes to the forest, is transformed because she is now dressed as a man. She becomes free, she speaks her mind, and she counsels Orlando to become a better lover, a more sensitive lover. Let us move ahead to the next module and see the important themes of this play. With 4 love plots and 4 love stories, it is easy for us to understand that the main theme of this particular play is love. The lovers fall in love at the first sight. Rosalind falls in love with Orlando after the wrestling match, and the same happens to Orlando. The moment Oliver sees Celia, he falls in love. So there is love, but this love is different from the conventional love that is portrayed in other plays. The conventional love talks about love as a disease, brings torment to the people who are in love. The lover is a servant to his mistress. These ideas were central features of courtly love tradition. Shakespeare breaks away from that love tradition. Rosalind talks about love that can be enjoyed, love that lasts for a long time or at least forever. The characters suffer, for example, Silvius, who is always lamenting, who always cries for his love. The same with Orlando, who says he will live and die for Rosalind. Rosalind, who is dressed as Ganymede, bluntly ridicules both Silvius and Orlando. She teaches Orlando to be a good lover. She teaches him to be an attentive one. The play breaks with the courtly love tradition. Love is a force of happiness, and that is what is brought forth by Shakespeare. As soon as Rosalind enters the forest of Arden, she displays her own profuse knowledge of the ways of love. Disguised as Ganymede, she teaches Orlando how to be a true lover. She counsels Silvius, and she also reprimands Phoebe. In contrast to Rosalind, we find Jacquez and Touchstone, who have biting tongues, and they speak about the follies of romance, about the follies of love. Rosalind does not belittle love. In fact, she seeks to teach the version of love that can not only survive in the real world, but also bring delight to people who are in love. In the end, having successfully devised the marriages and ensured a happy and peaceful return to a more just government, Rosalind proves that love is a source of delight, it is a source of joy, it is a source of happiness. Let us move on to the next module, where the next theme, that is the natural versus the artificial, is explored. Shakespeare's themes are often expressed in terms of opposites. Running throughout the play, there is a tension of antithesis between the wholesome and the artificial. The wholesome in the form of the forest of Arden, and the artificial, that is a man-made court life. The clash between the two ways of life is seen in several levels. The civilized society of the court, or the great countryside which is found in the forest of Arden. Within the family also we see a lot of conflict between the brothers, especially between Orlando and Oliver, between Duke Frederick and his elder brother. Love is based on a genuine emotion. This hatred that we see between the brothers is actually in contrast to the love that Celia has for her cousin sister, Rosalind. So, there is again a contrast between brotherly hatred and a love between cousins who are not so closely related. As the play opens, we see that Orlando has been denied the patrimony, he has been denied education, and we see the use of the word mutiny by him. This hatred runs both in him as well as Oliver. Celia, as I said earlier, on the other hand, loves Rosalind and is willing to give up the luxuries of a court and go along with Rosalind into the forest of Arden. Pastoral literature thrives on this contrast between the life in a rural area and the life between the court, that is the urban area. Shakespeare does not really wish to tell us that life in the rural area is better than life in the court. What he is trying to say is that when the tensions in the court increases, one should move away to a rural area so that they get rejuvenated and get back to their life as better human beings. This is exactly what he is trying to tell us in this particular play, because all the people who come to the forest of Arden do undergo some amount of strife when they come, whether it is Rosalind, whether it is Orlando, whether it is Oliver or the senior duke. But when they go back, they are transformed and reformed human beings. This type of restoration in turn enables one to return to the city as a better human being and as a better person. Many are healed in this forest. The lovesick couple are united. The duke gets back his dukedom. But Shakespeare reminds us that life in Arden is a temporary affair. It is not a permanent solution. As I said earlier, Shakespeare's intention was not to tell that life in the forest was better than life in the court. He was just trying to reiterate the fact that living in the forest would definitely give them the time to know themselves and bring them closer to nature, so that they are away from the harsh reality and strife of life which they face in the court. But once they are rejuvenated and once they realize themselves and get peace within themselves, they go back to the city as better human beings. So, there is definitely a difference between the natural and the artificial, but then Shakespeare does not say that the natural is better than the artificial. He says for a better life, both of them are equally important. Now, let us study more about the important characters in this play in the next module. With the intricacy of her emotions and fullness of her character, Rosalind dominates As You Like It in a way that no other character matches up to her. Orlando comes across as a handsome, strong, affectionate, unskilled poet. Yet we feel that Rosalind settles for someone slightly less magnificent than herself. In a way, it's a compromise that she makes because she is a very strong character and she comes across as a person who is very sure of her feelings and very sure of what she speaks. Coming to Jacquez and Touchstone, both are court jesters, but in Shakespearean plays, they play a very vital role because they give their comments on things that happen around. Jacquez and Touchstone do not leave a very major impact in the play. They are easily overcome by Rosalind. With her wit and humor and her intellectual talk, she easily dominates the play. Jacquez comes across as a melancholic pessimist who does not really contribute much to the play. He seems dull in front of Rosalind. Touchstone, on the other hand, is also the same. He does not really comment on the happenings around. He does have his own wit and humor, but then they do not really hurt or jab. Rosalind gives herself fully to the circumstances around. As Ganymede, she chastises Silvius. She criticizes Phoebe. She tries to tell Orlando how a good lover should be. She retains the disguise of a young man till the very end of the play. She does that to also instruct Orlando. She teaches him how to be a better lover. Rosalind is both aware of the foolishness of romantic love and also delighted to be in love. She teaches those around her to think, to feel, and to love better. Orlando is a noble character. Orlando is unschooled, yet somehow he comes across as a learned person. He is brave, he is generous. Though he does not possess Rosalind's wit and insight into life, he relies on commonplace cliches in matters of love, declaring that without Rosalind he would surely die. Time and again, Orlando performs tasks that reveal his nobility. For instance, when they enter the forest of Arden and he sees Adam very hungry, he jumps into the camp of the senior duke to fight for food. Of course, he is invited by the duke and they become friends eventually. He risks his own life to save his elder brother Oliver. He violates the trees of Arden and he writes love poetry on the branches of the trees for Rosalind. In the beginning of the play, he is really against his brother Oliver. And he feels that Oliver should have given him a chance of a better schooling so that he would have become a better gentleman. But by the end of the play, we realize and we understand that he is a gentleman even without that education. Let us move on to the next module and see the characters of Jacquez and Touchstone in detail. In a play that delights so much in happiness, Jacquez delights in being sad. He is a pessimist. He is the Duke Senior's fool and he speaks his mind. But Jacquez lacks the keenness or insight of a Shakespearean jester. For example, he is not as penetrating as Twelfth Night's Feste or King Lear's fool. He lives by thought and is just an onlooker. He doesn't really contribute much to the criticism in the play. He is not an active participant in that way. However, his own faculties as a critic about the going-ons around him are considerably diminished in comparison to Rosalind. Now, as the play progresses, we see a lot of happenings with Touchstone as well as Jacquez. In the end, it is fitting that Jacquez does not wish to go back to the court. He continues to stay back in the forest of Arden along with Duke Frederick. He does not go back because he feels that he has to know more about himself, which he can do so if he lives in the forest of Arden. It is evident that his melancholy is partly a pose, a pensive musing on life and reflection of his self, which is created by his own vanity, his egotism and his intellectual superiority that he feels. Touchstone too is a fool. In Duke Frederick's household, Celia and Rosalind decide to go to the forest of Arden along with him. When he arrives in the forest of Arden, he finds that his familiarity with the courtly language and the courtly customs impress the simple shepherds and shepherdesses around. He uses this to his advantage and tries to marry Audrey. In what is described as a parody of romantic and love marriage, the wit of Touchstone is not scintillating. It burns, but it burns in a steady flame. It is sententious, but it is not brilliant. His criticism, as I said, is more philosophic than frivolous. His outpour is never malicious. He is not bitter. His satire doesn't cut through. His shafts are harmless. They have no barb and they leave no sting. So both Jacquez and Touchstone do not really contribute a lot to the happenings in the play, like the other fools in the other plays of Shakespeare, because Rosalind tends to dominate. As You Like It uses disguise initially for the purpose of identity bending for temporary gain, but as the play moves ahead and comes to its final conclusion, this deceit leads to the revelations of a higher truth. Thus, while there is obvious trickery, the result leads to the exact opposite, that is a happy ending. Arguably, Rosalind is one of the most powerful of all women characters created by Shakespeare. In terms of personality and wit, she is unmatched. Nobody can match her. One of the reasons she is able to express herself so fully is because she is dressed as a man. She is disguised as a male in this play. This allows her to experience a kind of freedom. She is free with her emotions. Not just that, once she comes to the forest of Arden, there is a lot of openness, there is a lot of freshness, there is a lot of rusticness that pervades in the atmosphere there. Being dressed as a man and also in a place which has a lot of freedom, Rosalind is able to speak her mind because she is talking as a man. Had she been a woman, probably she would not have expressed herself the way she did in the play. In her male role, she is able to criticize poetry. She is able to criticize the various aspects of love. She is able to criticize Sylvius for his lovelorn foolishness and stupidity. She is able to criticize Phoebe for being such a heartless lover. At the same time, being a man, she is able to transform and reform Orlando's perspective towards love. She says to liberty and not to banishment, implying that having been expelled from everyday life, She is now acquired freedom to express herself freely. When she delivers the epilogue, which has never happened in an Elizabethan drama, a woman delivering an epilogue, but in this play, Shakespeare lets her deliver the epilogue. She speaks with confidence about the happenings in the play. The gender bending result of disguise in this play is very, very complex. One must understand that Rosalind is actually played by a male in the play, who is first a woman in the form of Rosalind, goes back to being a man as Ganymede, and comes back to being Rosalind at the very end of the play. So the actual person who is acting as Rosalind in the play is not a woman but a man who is disguised as a woman who is Rosalind. This is something which you must understand very clearly, because Rosalind, who is the actor in the play, is not a female but a male who is playing the part of a female. Rosalind's transformation from a female to the main character, we are made aware of her accomplishments fully. This could have been possible only by a great dramatist like Shakespeare. Let us move on to the next concluding module, which analyzes the epilogue of this play. The epilogue of the play is that part wherein one actor of the play stays back on the stage after the play has ended. It was a customary part of many plays in the Elizabethan times. The epilogue actually is a convenient way to tie up loose ends in the play, to distill the thematic concerns of the play, and to ask an applause from the audience. But Shakespeare explodes all the conventions of the form when he allows Rosalind to take up the epilogue on the stage, because all these days it was the men who were doing the epilogue. And As You Like It is perhaps the only play wherein the lady speaks in the epilogue. Rosalind steps forward during the epilogue and admits that the play is breaking all the theatrical customs. She assures the audience that the play improves in the epilogue. She seeks the audience's indulgence. She will not beg the audience for their approval because she is not dressed like a beggar. Instead, she will further enchant them as an actor. She begins with the woman and asks them to like the play as much as it pleases them. She turns to the men and tells them that if she were a woman, she would kiss as many as were handsome and hygienic. Thus, going from a man's role to a woman, and then again to a man's role, and re-emerging as Rosalind, in the end, the actor ensures that the play is liked by both men as well as women. As You Like It, as I have said earlier, is the finest of Shakespeare's comedies. I hope you have enjoyed listening to this lesson as much as I have enjoyed teaching it to you. All the best for your future endeavors. Thank you very much.